So the Chicago Bears have lost 3 straight games and just fired their offensive coordinator in an attempt to give their already struggling offense some sort of a boost. However, I think the Bears' issues are more problematic than who's calling the plays and a banged-up O-line. So I've got to talk about that. QB woes continuing for the Jags, the Colts seeing another QB change, the Pat McAfee show spreading hilarious fake news, and more right after. First up, Trevor Lawrence has been ruled out yet again for this week's game against the Lions. He's been dealing with what's being described as shoulder soreness in his non-throwing shoulder, and it had him sidelined for last week's game against the Vikings. There have been some rumblings that it's bad enough he could require surgery, but that is yet to be confirmed, and they might be holding out hope that he can rest one more week. So yeah, it's against the Lions, but then they have their bye week the week after, week 12, so maybe that could be enough time for Lawrence to get right. We shall see. Either way, it's once again going to be the Mac Jones show for Jacksonville. He was on the struggle bus last week against Minnesota, throwing for just 111 yards and 2 crucial picks late in the fourth quarter. I mean, it's not a great way to come back for Mac Jones. You've had to go against the Vikings defense. They are allowing the 3rd fewest points per game. And now he has to go on the road to play the Lions defense. That's allowing the 8th fewest points per game. So best of luck to you, Mac. We'll see you on the other side. Someone we will not see on the sideline for the Chicago Bears is offensive coordinator Shane Waldron, who the team fired yesterday. It really came as no surprise considering the Bears are now 24th in points per game and 30th in yards per game, despite all the talent they have at their skill positions. There's so many I don't even need to name them. However, they've been especially bad since week 7. Take a look at all these metrics that the Bears are last in. Yards per drive, offensive touchdowns per game, EPA per dropback, completion percentage, sacks allowed per game, percentage of drives ending in a TD, and percentage of drives ending in a punt. Yeah, not great. Caleb Williams has shown flashes at times, but there's no question he's been struggling big time in his rookie season. He's 29th in QBR, only ahead of Gardner Minshew, Will Levis, and Deshaun Watson. He's completing just over 60% of his passes this year, but when it comes to pass attempts of 15 yards or more, he has the lowest completion percentage of any QB over the last 15 years. So he ranks 468th out of 468. Now, in Caleb's defense, a big reason as to why he's had a hard time this year is because the Bears' O-line has been atrocious. Caleb's been pressured 90 times this season, which is the 3rd most in the league. He's taken 38 sacks, which is the most in the league, even 4 more than C.J. Stroud, despite playing 1 less game than he has. However, this is kind of interesting. Caleb is tied for 10th in pocket time with an average of 2.4 seconds to throw after the snap. Then, according to PFF, the Bears' offensive line is actually ranked 10th in pass blocking, which is definitely higher than I expected. So some of the issues are definitely on Caleb. He seems to be holding on to the ball and trying to do too much at times, but he's not helped out by the piss-poor play calling, hence the shakeup at the offensive coordinator position. Then on top of that, the O-line keeps losing players to injury. Last week, Chicago went into the Patriots game without 2 of their starting tackles, then lost one of their starting guards during the game with only 6 healthy linemen even finishing. And if that wasn't enough, they also released guard Nate Davis today, a man they just signed to a 3-year, $30 million contract in 2023. He started in 11 games last year, but finished with a pretty low PFF grade. I mean, below average for sure. Things weren't much better this season. He had a 53.6 PFF grade in his 142 offensive snaps before the Bears pulled him out of the starting lineup in week 5. Since he was released after the trade deadline, it's worth noting he's got to clear waivers. And any team that wants to claim him, they'll have to put him on the 53-man roster. That's just how it works. But they will also need to pay the remaining $3.9 million of guarantees on his current deal. And that's quite a bit of money to pay, but somebody might take a chance on him, especially if they are very needy at the offensive line position, specifically the guard spot. Either way, things are not looking good for the Bears to close out the season. And I don't even mean to make the playoffs, but just to win a few more games. 6, maybe 7. Sounds wild to say considering they started 4-2, but they've now lost 3 straight and have one of the toughest remaining, if not the toughest remaining schedule in the entire NFL. They have to play the Lions twice, the Packers twice, the Vikings twice, then the 49ers, and then what will be their easiest game is going to be against the Seattle Seahawks. So 6 division games yet to be played, and considering that Matt Eberflus is 2-10 against the NFC North over his tenure, things aren't looking good, to say the least. And that brings me to what might possibly really be the biggest problem with the Bears. Matt Eberflus. You can blame the play calling, you can blame the O-line or Caleb Williams, but at the end of the day, it all falls on the head coach. I realize he's a defensive-minded guy, but it's his responsibility to oversee the entire team and make some of the staffing decisions, including the decision to hire Shane Waldron as the offensive coordinator. And sure, the defense has been solid this year, but it's not like they've been great over his 3 years with the team. They were dead last in points allowed in 2022. Maybe give him a break there. It was his first year, right? Okay, well, the next year, 20th last season, and then to his credit, they do rank 7th this year. So the defense is trending up, but I mentioned his record, 2-10 against the division. That's not great. And then he's also just 14 of 29 overall since taking over in Chicago, and has a lower win percentage than Robert Saleh and Dennis Allen, both of whom got fired this season. So yeah, there's all kinds of problems with the Bears at the moment, and I think the only thing saving him for now is the shakeup in offensive play callers and him being a defensive-minded guy. This is easier said than done, but Chicago may do well to seek out an offensive-minded coach this offseason. I don't know the contract details, so maybe it's not possible, but a GM or an owner obviously can make executive decisions and cut guys loose. And maybe that's why the Bears should find an offensive-minded coach this offseason that can work hand-in-hand with Caleb Williams. But what do you guys think? Do the Bears just need to get their offense together and keep Eberflus around, especially when you look at the defensive side of the ball and they're trending up every year? Or is he possibly the bigger problem and therefore needs to go? Let me know either way in the comments down below. Next up, while we're on the subject of teams with struggling quarterbacks, we've got to talk about the Indianapolis Colts, because it was announced today that the team will be benching Joe Flacco and going back to Anthony Richardson, not just for this week, supposedly not just for this week, but for the remainder of the season. The Colts benched Richardson after that Week 8 loss to the Texans, in which he completed just 10 passes and tapped himself out of the game because he was tired. They made the switch to Joe Flacco, and in his first start against the Vikings, Flacco was just 16 of 27 for 179 yards and an interception as the Colts failed to score a single offensive touchdown. Then last week against the Bills, he did throw for 272 yards and a couple of touchdowns, but he threw 3 picks and got strip sacked as well. The Colts lost both games, dropped to 4-6, and looked just as bad, if not worse, than they did with AR under center. Now, I kind of had a feeling that them benching Richardson was just a temporary thing, a sort of timeout/disciplinary issue, because they really had no choice. If they didn't bench him after he told the world he left the field on 3rd down because he needed some milk, the respect of the locker room towards Steichen and company would have dropped dramatically. So now Richardson is back, and we know he's struggled, but you need to give this man as many real reps as possible, more than you need to give a 39-year-old Flacco out there reps, because Flacco is not the future or the supposed future of this franchise. That is definitely, in theory, Anthony Richardson. After all, Indy took Richardson 4th overall in last year's draft, and he's only started in 10 games. It's been an issue of injuries mainly, but he's going through all kinds of stuff, and he needs reps on the field. Only 10 games. So give the guy reps, and let's see if he really can be the future for this team. Now, when asked about what he's seen from Richardson as of late, maybe even just while he's sitting on the bench and learning/growing, Steichen said, "It's the attention to detail in everything he does. It's got to be a higher standard. Over the last 2 weeks, he's made strides in those areas." So we will see if that translates to the field, but even if he continues to struggle, they don't really have anything to lose. They're 4-6 and have an uphill climb to make the playoffs as it is. So start Anthony Richardson. And since we're talking about the Indianapolis Colts, there is a certain show based out of Indianapolis that is in the news for a pretty hilarious reason. During Aaron Rodgers' appearance on the Pat McAfee show yesterday, so during that segment, a quote-unquote stat was mentioned that drew some attention. They were talking about how many picks Jared Goff threw in that wild win over the Texans, and Rodgers then somehow referenced this tweet from Mr. Civ that said, "This is now Jared Goff's 7th career game with at least 4 interceptions. His record in those games, 6-0.
The amazing stat, though, is this a true stat that he's done 4 more picks 7 times and he's won every single one of those games? Is that real?
Yep, 7-0.
Well, the stat they were referencing was actually completely fabricated and ended up getting community noted on X. I think the community note happened after it was on the show, but still, it was fake. Mr. Civ even went on to say, "If you ever wondered how easy it is to spread fake information, I made this stat up while laying in bed at halftime of the game." So the real stat is Goff is actually 1-1 in games when he's thrown 4 or more picks, one loss coming in 2018, and the lone win coming from this past Monday night game against the Texans. And while at the time of me recording this video, McAfee hasn't discussed it or addressed it live in his show today, he did respond to the tweet that sort of exposed them with comments aplenty roasting them by saying, "Oh no." I bring this up because it's definitely important to fact check stuff, especially if it's a tweet, even with lots of likes and retweets. But either way, it's still pretty funny to see a completely made up stat like that making it onto the show with everybody in the room being like, yep, it's definitely true. Anyway, that's all I have for you guys today. And with that, I'll see y'all next time.